I knew from a very young age that I was male, but also knew from a very young age that I would be destined to lose my family, essentially. And unfortunately, that is what happened. I think the message that I received so consistently growing up was that if you are any part of the LGBTQ plus community, that God doesn't love you.
I became a pastor because I felt like being a Christian was the way to know the truth. My church was really near a conservative Christian college in Southern California. And so we always had students coming to our church, and every year there were quite a few people who would confide in me that they were attracted to the same sex. And as a conservative church, we pretty much prayed the gay away. And so we even developed a fund from our church to send people to conversion therapy, hoping that they'll change.
I don't remember a time when I thought, oh my goodness, like, am I bad? Am I going to go to hell? These things. If anything, it was, I truly believe that, like, I'm not, and like that God does love me, but why is everyone else saying that he hates me?
I was taught that God created male and female. When someone is born either male or female, that's God's original intent, and that God doesn't make mistakes.
I was so low at that point that I actually had a brief moment where I did consider suicide. I thankfully did not. I had fought so hard to get to that point of coming out and to be myself that I was not about to do that. But it was just so emotionally traumatizing that it was hard for me to imagine anyone loving me.
When I first met Lyndon, we were introduced to him by a friend who told us that there was a person who had just come out as trans, that his parents had disowned him. I didn't have my theology all together, but what I knew was that we had to figure out how to love this person. And that to me was enough reason for us, my wife and I, to say, hey, we need to take this kid in. I remember thinking that here's a mom and dad who were believing this theology, and they believe that it's so much, even that though they had good intention, their belief was causing harm. And it brought me back to, one of our most important commandments when Jesus says that the greatest commandment is to love God and love neighbor. If loving God and loving neighbor is the greatest commandment, then that means the opposite of that, to not love, is the worst sin. It dawned on me, I was the one that was committing sin. When Lyndon first came in, you could just see this beautiful soul, but broken.
There were weeks, where I would hardly come out of my room, honestly broken and just in despair and just deep grief for the loss of my family. I also lost a lot of friends.
I didn't really have much knowledge on the trans experience. So from the very beginning, he just kind of shared, his process. He shared about gender dysphoria. He talked about all these things, what was difficult for him. And the more he talked about these specific stories, the more we were like, oh my gosh, how hard and how difficult gender dysphoria is.
Honestly, what he described as how much I was struggling is totally accurate. I would try my best to cope with it, but there were a lot of days where I just couldn't cope anymore. But the fact that I felt safe enough, I can grieve this openly, I can be this raw and real with them because it's going to be okay, was such a gift.
I pastor a Christian church, and we recently became affirming. And so one of the things that we've had to try to figure out is that it's one thing to state you're affirming, and then it's another thing to actually practice it. And so one of the things that we're having to do, especially since so much of our leadership is cis and straight, is that we have to lean into the stories of our LGBTQ people. And we are, trying to incorporate them into leadership so that from the very highest level of our church, that there are LGBTQ voices speaking into the room. And so we want to hear directly from our LGBTQ people what they need, what they don't need, what feels unsafe. And those are conversations that we are currently having. And, some of those are like hard, but they're necessary. At the end of the day, it is just about learning how to love. And I think that's what happened between Lyndon and myself and our family, is we were put in a situation where we had to figure this out. And sometimes love means to go to places that might not be familiar for you. And so I think, the church can change. I think communities can change. This isn't about this like complex theology, but it's just trying to figure out, how do we come alongside people that will give them the best chance for like human flourishing, for them to thrive, for them to be able to love?
Danny specifically restored my faith in God and in a community of people who believe in God. To have him look at me and say, "You are loved exactly as you are, and God loves you," was, I can't put it into words, honestly.